There is an old saying whispered across many African villages, that a woman scorned within her own family carries a wound that never fully heals, and sometimes, in her pain, she passes that wound to those who never asked to carry it. This is one of those stories. A story about a mother-in-law whose hatred ran so deep it reached into the cradles of innocent children, and a daughter-in-law whose love proved stronger than any dark word ever spoken under a moonless sky. Adaeze was everything a young wife should be. She was gentle, hardworking, and deeply devoted to her husband, Emeka. They lived in a modest compound on the outskirts of a quiet town in southeastern Nigeria, where the mango trees grew tall and the rains came faithfully every season. Their life together was simple, but it was full. They laughed easily, prayed together at dawn, and dreamed of filling their home with children. And for a time, that dream seemed well within reach. Adaeze fell pregnant not long after their first anniversary, and the whole community celebrated as if the blessing belonged to everyone. But not everyone was celebrating. Mama Obiageli, Emeka's mother, sat alone in her room the night they announced the pregnancy and said nothing for a long time. She had never approved of Adaeze. From the very beginning, she believed her son had married below their family standing. In her eyes, Adaeze was a village girl with no status, no notable lineage, and no business being the mother of her grandchildren. The pregnancy, rather than softening her heart, hardened it. She began to see the growing child in Adaeze's womb not as a blessing, but as a threat, a permanent tie between her son and a woman she despised. What happened next is the kind of thing that careful people speak of only in hushed tones. Mama Obiageli saw the counsel of a woman known in the surrounding villages as someone who dealt in forces beyond the ordinary. She was not a healer. She was not a priestess in the dignified sense. She was a woman who had learned to bend certain old energies toward harmful ends. And Mama Obiageli paid her well. What she asked for was not the death of Adaeze. She was cleverer than that. She asked for something slower, something that would make Adaeze suffer without ever being able to prove why. The curse she requested was placed on Adaeze's children. Every child born of that union, the old woman said, would carry sorrow like a garment. They would fall ill without cause. They would struggle where others succeeded. They would be bright but never allowed to shine, loved but never allowed to feel it. It was a generational sentence, the kind that African folklore has long warned about, the punishment that travels through blood rather than targeting one person alone. And Mama Obiageli returned home with a quiet satisfaction that chilled the air around her. The first signs appeared after Adaeze delivered her son, Chukwumeka Jr., a round and healthy-looking boy who began to lose weight in his third week of life without any medical explanation. Doctors in the local clinic found nothing wrong. Traditional herbs brought no improvement. The baby cried at hours when babies are usually peaceful, and slept through hours when sunlight should have stirred him. Neighbors who visited left with uncomfortable feelings they could not explain. Adaeze herself felt a heaviness settle into the house that she had never felt before, a kind of invisible pressure that sat in every corner. Emeka, a practical man by nature, resisted the idea that something spiritual was at work. He took his son to a hospital in the city. The boy was tested, monitored, and eventually declared physically well, yet he continued to struggle. Then their second child, a daughter named Nena, arrived 2 years later, and within months the same pattern began. Strange illnesses. Unexplained setbacks. A heaviness that medicine could not touch. Adaeze began to ask questions, quietly at first, then with increasing urgency. She spoke to older women in the community, women who had lived long enough to recognize patterns that younger eyes could not see. It was one such woman, an elderly neighbor named Mama Chinye, who first said the word out loud. Curse. She said it plainly, without drama, the way someone names a thing they have seen before. She told Adaeze that what she was describing had the shape of something intentional, something sent. She told her that in her many years she had seen this kind of sorrow before, and it always had a source. She asked Adaeze one careful question: who in her life carried a grievance against her children before they were even born? Adaeze did not answer immediately. But that night, alone in the kitchen while Emeka slept, she allowed herself to think the name she had been afraid to think. Mama Obiageli. African folklore, particularly across Igbo, Yoruba, and many Bantu-speaking communities, holds a deep and serious understanding of generational curses. These are not mere superstitions. They are part of a broader cosmological framework in which the spoken word, especially from someone in authority over a family, carries binding power. A mother, a grandmother, an elder, their words are believed to carry weight that reaches beyond the moment they are spoken. The curse of a parent or grandparent is considered particularly dangerous because it travels through the roots of a family tree, affecting those who come after. This is why in many traditional cultures, the reconciliation of family conflicts is treated as a matter of urgency, not merely for peace, but for protection. Adaeze did not respond with bitterness. This is the part of her story that separates her from an ordinary tale of conflict and makes it something worth remembering. She could have confronted Mama Obiageli with anger. She could have taken the matter to family elders and demanded justice. She could have poisoned her husband's heart against his mother. Instead, she chose a path that required far more strength than any of those options. She chose understanding. She began to ask herself what kind of pain could drive a woman to curse her own grandchildren, and the more she sat with that question, the more she saw a woman who had spent decades believing that love was something you earned by being chosen, and who feared, more than anything, being replaced. She approached Mama Obiageli not with accusations but with a meal. She cooked the old woman's favorite soup, of onogbu, with the dried fish and cocoyam that she knew Mama Obiageli preferred, and she brought it to her on a quiet afternoon when Emeka was away at work. She sat with her mother-in-law and said nothing about curses, nothing about the children's suffering, nothing about the visits to healers or the wait in the house. She simply said that she had been thinking about how alone Mama Obiageli must feel now that her son belonged to a new home, and that she wanted her to know that she was not replaced. She was needed. She was the grandmother. She was the root. Something cracked in Mama Obiageli that afternoon. The women who have studied these things, the scholars of African oral tradition and family psychology, often speak of how curses born of pain can dissolve when the pain itself is acknowledged. Not excused, not celebrated, but seen. Mama Obiageli began to weep, slowly at first, then fully. She did not confess everything that day. But she asked Adaeze if she could hold the baby, little Nena, who Adaeze had brought along in a wrapper on her back. And when the old woman held that child and looked into her face, something shifted in the atmosphere of that household in a way that everyone who was present that afternoon would later describe with the same word, release. Within weeks, Chukwemeka Jr. began to stabilize. His appetite returned. His laughter came back into the house like a guest who had been too long away. Nena, who had been fussy and unsettled since birth, began to sleep through the night. The heaviness that had pressed against the walls of Adaeze's home for years lifted in a way that felt physical, like a window thrown open after a long winter. Mama Obiageli began visiting regularly, bringing food, telling the children stories, doing the small daily things that grandmothers do. She never used the word curse. But she returned to the healer she had paid and demanded that what she had set in motion be undone. The lesson that this story carries is not a simple one. It does not say that cruelty should be met with passivity, or that those who do harm should face no consequence. What it says is that some battles cannot be won with the same energy that started them. Adaeze did not defeat the curse by fighting it. She defeated it by removing its power source, which was not a ritual or a charm, but a broken relationship and a wound that had never been addressed. In many African traditions, the healing of a family begins not in the next generation but in an honest moment between two people willing to lay something heavy down. Emeka eventually learned what his mother had done. He sat with that knowledge for a long time, and it changed him. But it also changed his understanding of his wife, who had seen clearly what was happening and had chosen grace over destruction. Their family did not become perfect. Families never do. But they became honest, and in many ways, That is a greater gift than anything else a parent can pass on to a child. The children of Adaeze grew up knowing that the women in their family had faced something difficult and had found a way through it that preserved everyone's dignity, including the one who had caused the harm. And in a world where so many family stories end in permanent fracture, that is the kind of ending worth telling again and again.